Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, glad you're back on the Investigative Journal on this Wednesday, August 23rd, 2017 day on our calendar. And I want to start out today by referring you to my website at greganthonysjournal.wordpress.com. And what I'm doing in the last couple days, I have been doing shows on a video called I Pet Goat 2, which is an esoteric video, I believe, put out by the powers that be, the Vatican-led New World Order, to kind of give us a clue of what they have in store for us. And what I've decided to do, this came out in 2012. People said, well, this isn't new. I said, well, it is. It's like a split second of 4 or 5 years to the Vatican-led New World Order. They plan things out hundreds of years in advance. And wasn't it true that the Simpson episode that showed Trump coming down the escalator in Trump Towers with the exact same hand movements, the exact same tie? I guess the little puppy here, who I still haven't found a home, believes me. And anyway, I'm going to continue right through it. She sneaks into the studio here, and I can't get up and just push her away. So anyway, she will quiet down. But anyway, that came out way, way before Trump really went down the escalator. They know what's happening. And that didn't come to light till just maybe 6 months after. I mean, right when he was coming down the escalator, everybody started talking about it. So I thought to bring a discussion about I Pet Goat 2, seeing that there's a scene in there that I think depicts the eclipse of the 21st. And so we started there, and I decided to start a writing contest. And that is, you watch the video. It's easily accessible. It's on my website as well. And then you write out, look at all the scenes and pick out as many things as you see, and then send it in. And I'm going to hold a contest, and the winner and the runner-up will get an hour radio show. And I've asked for a $25 donation or entry fee to keep the radio show going, plus to take care of my time of reading all of the, making decisions, reading all of these papers that will be sent in. And hopefully somebody will send some in. We'll see. But anyway, I wanted to point that out. So go to my website at greganthonysjournal.wordpress.com, and you can get that. Now, I get a lot of different emails. I mean, from all over, but I'll show you some of these that I get. And this one was quite interesting. I'm going to go to it right now. Just let me find it here. Okay, I know I just had it, and now it's eluded me, and I will find it for you. Okay, I've got it. This came from just the other day to me, Templars Monaco, and it's at Yahoo. But anyway, it said, Dear Greg, I'm Mr. Domizio Cipriani. Your name was given to me. He's an Italian, so his English is a little broken. So that you may read my book. It's called The Great Prior Magistral, President of the Association Ordine dei Templars di Jerusalem and the Senegal of Order of Rosicrucians Veritas, member of Board of Directors in Monte Carlo Masonic Executive Committee. We have one neutral academy with different levels of study, and our goal is to share our knowledge to help people to communicate in peace without war, and to help wake up consciousness by universal brotherhood. We are not political or religious organizations. We are an ecumenical Christian people on the base. Okay. I'd like to present you my first book, Templar Order, translated in 4 languages, where I describe my experience and the knowledge of our old brotherhood. All my royalties will be donated to help children we look for somebody interested to help us to distribute and promote this book in the world, also with reviews. Next month I will distribute my book too. I'd like you to help us. Our organization's in Monaco, authorized by the government of the Crown and recognized by the United Nations, number 646768, and from the Anglican Church, and represented in 70 countries. My book, in English version, is already available online, and he gives me the link to get to that. Could be an idea for a new film about the Priory de Sion today and Templar Brotherhood. In the Priory, I didn't realize there was. I guess they're in the Priory de Sion. That was referenced. I got a story on that too. I'm going to give you in a minute. In the Priory, we have scientific committee, and maybe you and me, we could work together. Okay, official review. They got a presentation video. You can get it. He's going to show that, and I haven't watched that yet. Thank you for your attention. Kind regards, Domicio Cipriani, Grand Prior Magistrale de Monaco, Order de Templar de Jerusalem. And I was told that if he sent me this, that they would want me to join. I could get into their learning program. Okay. So, it's always what I wanted to do, is join the Templar Ordinale, the Templar Order, be a Knights Templar. It's my life's goal, become a Knights Templar. It reminds me of when I came back from Italy, and I was so sick and tired of working in journalism because I was almost killed there from a bomb explosion. Then I tried to get the truth out, and then, boy, I was just shunned. Nobody would publish those stories. Oh, they'd take these travel stories. So I said, if I want to continue writing that stuff, I just didn't want to. So when I came back to the States, I kind of got out of journalism and was looking for other things. So when I arrived in New York, after spending most of my money the last year in Italy, I figured I'd travel around and see the country without having to write about it. And came to New York, and I needed a job. And so I ended up being a waiter in an Italian restaurant. And I was working at a night party, and all these Sicilians were there, and they were loving me because I could speak Italian, and they were tipping me quite well. And this one guy got me a job writing. He said, "You want to make good money?" So he gave me a job as he owned 10 of the medallions, the horses that drive, the carriage drivers, the hansom cab drivers. So I was a hansom cab driver, which made really good money and got me enough money to come to the West Coast. And my dream, I remember I was laughing with people. I said when that Italian guy at a late night party, I think it was a mafia party, I said, when he offered me a job, I said, I finally made it. I finally am in the mob. I never could be a made man because I wasn't Italian by birth, or by, my family wasn't Italian. But anyway, jokingly would always tell that story. But, I kind of felt the same way when this guy sent me this. I said, wow, I finally made it. They want me in the order after listening to me criticize them all the time. Now they want me in. What do you know? You never know what happens. It's a funny world, isn't it? So anyway, that reminds me, he was mentioning they want to do maybe a movie about the Priory de Sion. Now, that name first came out back in the 80s. There was a book called The Messianic Legacy. And I happened to run into the two authors of that book. Not knowing at the time, they were in Rome doing research on the killing of the Pope. And one of them turns out to be I think he's still the editor of the top Masonic magazine. Or he was the editor of it. So you know where those guys were coming from. But The Masonic Legacy is a book I recommend all Christians read. And don't be frightened of it, because you can see the propaganda that they spread. And the propaganda is the book I read. I remember reading it, not a long book. And it had to do, there was a book they also wrote called The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. Well, the whole story in the Messianic legacy was that Jesus didn't die on the cross, and he fled out of Jerusalem there. He fled out of that country to France, where he was married. Now, they say, I believe it was to Mary Magdalene, and they had children, and he died an old man. But his bloodline carried on. And the bloodline carried on to today, they say. And that bloodline was carried by the Priory de Sion. And at the time of this book, I remember reading it, and it went to meticulous, they really went down and started, they presented all this stuff in the Messianic legacy, and showing that the bloodline of Christ still lives, and that his bloodline is still around. And it was in the hand, the guy that was carrying the bloodline, was the one still living, was Jacques Plantard. And he was the head of the Priory de Sion in France. They had an office there. Now, how I found out they had an office there was I started researching it because I read that book, and I said, okay. At the time, I was an atheist, so, I could say, well, okay, Jesus, I can buy this. Now, where did they get all this information? And so I started researching it, and I started this way. By finding out that the Priory de Sion had an office in France, in Paris. So I had the address, and back then there was no email. I tried calling, didn't get an answer, and there was no other way to communicate, so I talked one of my editors into paying for me to go there and to do a story. And I said, wouldn't it be a great story if I could actually talk with the guy who professes to have the bloodline of Christ? Now, this story was appearing in a lot of the Italian newspapers at the time. And I didn't know who put him there. And like I said, I was not. I was aspiritual, apolitical. I said, let the facts lead me to where they go. And I still like reading all kinds of things. And whether it be strictly Christian or whether it be the Bible, and I still enjoy listening to what other people think about spirituality, even though they may not agree with the Christian view. So I get the money to go, and I took a train to Paris. And I remember I got there in the evening time, so I had a nice evening and started, and I milked the thing a little bit. I got a few days there, so I spent the first day kind of looking around at the things I always wanted to see in Paris, because that was my first time there. Although I did pass through on the way to Rome, but I didn't have much time. I was just in the train station, and then got a little pensione at night, so I didn't see much. So I spent a little time doing that. Then I finally got around to finding the address, and back then you didn't have Google Maps. You actually had to talk to somebody. And that was challenging because you didn't even have Google Translate. Now, what I mean by Google Translate is, you see, I'm never going to learn, I'm in Mexico now, and I'm never going to learn Spanish, and I'm going to tell you why. Hopefully this will come out. They have an app, and I'll get back to the story, and I use it all the time now. It's called Google Translate, but it talks. So I hit Google Translate, and I go into a grocery store, and I tap my little speech thing here. Okay, and it's English to Spanish. And I say in English, well, I'll talk. Where can I find the macaroni and cheese? Then it says,
¿Dónde puedo encontrar los macarrones y el queso?
¿Dónde puedo encontrar los macarrones y el queso? Isn't that interesting? A queso. Okay. What was the score of the Cubs game today?
¿Cuál fue la puntuación del juego de los cachorros hoy?
¿Cuál fue la puntuación del juego de los cachorros hoy? Cachorros hoy. Now, funny, I didn't say that too well, but it was funny when I was talking to some people in Spanish, and I repeat, they say, boy, you really sound like you're from Mexico when you talk. when I say some words in Spanish, and I go, yeah, it's because I spoke Italian, but I don't know any of the words. I rely on this thing, and I'm not learning. Plus, I speak English. I work in English all day. So, anyway, that's my story about. So there was no Google Translate, so I couldn't go up to the street cleaner or the guy in the flower shop and say, here, let me do it on Google App here, but I'll do it in Spanish because I don't want to change it to French. I said, where can I find this address of the Priory de Sion?
¿Dónde puedo encontrar esta dirección del diseño de la prioridad?
Okay, so if I would have had this back when I was there, I could have went up to the grocery store guy and said, hey, where can I find this address? And I just put that there, and then he'd answer, and you can just turn it to Spanish or French to English, and you let him speak, and then it translates it to me. Now, how am I ever going to learn Spanish? When I learned Italian, I had to actually speak. And then I remember I even took some classes, and that didn't help much. I learned primarily by translating newspapers and reading and doing my own course in a book. Now they have all these online courses. I have one that I bought. It's a big, huge, it's all DVDs. And I have it, and I haven't even opened it up. But anyway, I digress. Let's get back to where I was. So here I am I finally, figured out some way. I just wrote out the address, and then the guy said, over here, over there, to go, so I finally found it. And I went up to the office. And there it was. There was an office there. It said Priory de Sion, something. And I went up to the second floor. And there it was. I knocked. Nobody came. And just as I was about to leave, the door cracked open, and this woman who spoke broken English and French, I said, can I talk to, I think it was Jacques Plantard or something. That's close enough to his name. And she says, nobody here by that name. I said, is this the Priory de Sion? She said, no, that was an old place. They're not here So there was no office. That was, as they said in the newspapers in Rome. So I tried to find him. I spent another couple days, went everywhere. I went to the libraries. I went everywhere, and I could not locate this guy. Now, he's given I saw a picture of him. Now, whether it was controlled interviews or not, but then all of a sudden it disappeared. You don't hear anything more about the bloodline of Christ, do you? That was a movement that they had back then. And so I went back to Rome, and I wrote the story anyway. And the angle of the story was that there is no Priory. Who are these people? But research. I hit the wrong button. My editor said, why don't you do a little more research and see what you can uncover? Why is it in the newspaper? Who put it there? Was it, what group did this? Why are they trying to create upheaval with Christianity and Catholicism? And it angered a lot of people. And then there were reports, and I remember really searching. And back then, again, you did not have Google search. You had to actually go to the library and pull all the old newspapers and, do really work. Now, everybody goes, okay, why do the stars rotate with the sun and the moon from east to west? And why is the earth stationary? And you put that in Google search, and then you got all of your information, and it takes you there. Right for this. I think, with this writing contest I have up, part of it is that I believe, along with what's going now after Charlottesville, they're tearing down all of our statues and all of our history. I believe they want to tear down everything, get rid of all the books, and basically have you by the nose. They don't want any history anymore. They're not going to tell you the truth about anything, and you're not even going to have books to read anymore. It's all going to be online, so they can delete it at any moment they want. So you're going to take away everything. That's my thinking. And that's kind of a little bit of an interpretation of certain things that were in that I Pet Goat. And I think the title is quite interesting. So those of you thinking about spending $25, which I think would be, a great project to interpret this thing, and if I could get a lot of people to do it, we could maybe pick out all of them, because you miss a lot of these things. They go so quickly. And like somebody interpreted it, sent me a little email. He was not a member yet. It was before that. And he said, when they show that Psalm 23, you know what Psalm 23 is, hopefully. The Donald name is in there. And somebody sent me that and missed it and just said it was Psalm 23. They didn't catch the little Donald. So the point is, you may look at it and see something that I don't. I may look at it and see something you don't. And there'll be a third party that sees something we both don't see. And then we can get a better picture of really what they have planned for us. Because I think that is really an outline of the future. And they do that a lot. Just like they did in Back to the Future, the most esoterically filled movie I think ever made, the series, Back to the Future 2. And then, of course, The Simpsons have been on for over 20 years. Why? What sitcom in the history of the world stays on for 20 years? It's unprecedented. Hell, Jackie Gleason only stayed on for 1 year, probably one of the better sitcoms ever. And he said, I ran out of things to say, and I didn't want to deteriorate the show. But The Simpsons are insiders that have this inside Vatican-led Illuminati information. So I'm back in there researching the story on the Priory de Sion. And see what happens when somebody from the Templar Order sends me stuff. Really brings back a lot of memories. So I did find out that this stuff was planted into a library. Now, who went there and then got it into the newspaper? So I started checking. And I checked the journalists who wrote it. And I found it came out both in in Italy, there were every group, the communists had a paper at the time, the fascists, the Christian Democrats, and everybody had their own newspaper. And I find it came out in three of a communist paper, a Christian Democrat paper. So then I talked to the journalists, and I could never get a straight answer where they got their information. I said, do you ever talk to Jacques Plant? No. So obviously it was planted, and they were told to write it. And so I surmised that it was the Jesuits. Because one time, as the story, and I could not write that because I couldn't prove it, but I wrote the story about how speculative this is, how it was referenced in Dan Brown's book, or in these two journalists' book, I forget their names, from England, and then how the story started coming out in the newspapers in Italy, and how it was kind of disrupting things. There was like it was kind of the divide and conquer. The Christians then said, this is absurd, you can't depict our Jesus like this. And Catholics were in uproar, and it's something the Jesuits do. Now, how did I get that feeling? I remember I used to meet with a couple priests all the time, and different ones, because I covered the Vatican. And I'll get to that in a second and tell you where I used to meet them. And it's quite an interesting story. And I've talked about one of the meetings I had, but I'll explain it again when I come back after the break. So remember, go to my website at greganthonysjournal.wordpress.com, and you can enter that contest. The donate button or the entry button is there. Donate, $25 entry fee. You just put on your on the receipt that it's entry for the contest, and then I'll know. Okay, and then you know where to email it at gregbeacon@gmail.com, your interpretation. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, that was quick. We're back for the second half hour. So I'm talking about how I ran into the Priory de Sion years ago when I was in Rome, and how it relates to the book, The Messianic Legacy. I recommend you get it and read it, see what they're all about, how they propagandize. Now, you know, there are people that believe it, okay? And then there are people who say, no, Christ died on the cross, and that's the end of the story. So there is a conflict there as well. And my thinking was that the Jesuits put it out in Rome after I did the research to try to find out where this came from, these stories, Now the journalists, I did find out one of the guys who wrote it, turned out to be an editor. Afterwards, he became an editor of the biggest Freemason magazine in the world. So you know where he goes, where his allegiance is, the Pope in Rome. So, although I could not prove the Jesuits did it, I had an interesting conversation one time, and I used to be now if you go to the Vatican someday, right parallel to the Vatican, to the right, as you're looking at the Vatican straight on St. Peter's Square, you go to the right, the first street parallel to the Vatican. It's called the Strada di Butane. Now, that's not that tip. That's the street name. You won't see that on the sign. And what that means is the street of whores. And I found out I used to go there and sit down and have a coffee on one of the outside coffee shops. And at the time when I was there, that whole street is just selling holy water and beads and all the Catholic trinkets, all the statues of Mary and St. Christopher's medals. Every shop is selling all the hardware of the Vatican. And above are apartments. That's how Italians live. They have their shop below, then they live above in their apartment. Saves on gas, right? So I used to go there and have coffee, and I was told that story by one of the guy who owned the coffee shop. He said, "Do you know what the street's called there, Yankee?" He wouldn't call me Yankee. He'd say, "Gregorio?" I'd say, "No." He said, "The Strada di Butane." And then he told me that, I knew what that meant. And I said, "How did it ever get that name?" And he said this. He said, before World War II, this whole street used to house all of the ladies of the night. And the priests would walk over and get serviced here. And he said it was sectioned off. They knew, on this side was the women. On the other side, if they were homosexuals, was the men. And so they had it worked out very close. Then they said after World War II, when they were trying to clean up their image, they figured they better get this street gone because a lot of people are going to be coming from America and all over to see the Vatican. And that would put a kind of tarnish their reputation. So I said, "Well, they got rid of all the whores there, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Nice women." He said, my grandfather used to not take part in that. He said grandfather told him stories about it. But anyway, he said that. I said, "Well, what happened?" And he said, "Well, they just moved. There's a place they now go that's kind of far away. It's in the newer part of Rome." I said, "Okay, so they got to take a little taxi ride or a bus ride or whatever." So nothing's changed, just the location. But now all the shops are selling, at least when I was there, selling all these Vatican hardware. So anyway, long story short, occasionally I'd meet with a bishop or something, or a higher-level Vatican priest in there. And I'd say, "Why don't we meet for coffee? I'd like to ask you a few questions, Maybe we could think of a good story." And so I mentioned this to one of the bishops, and he said, "Well, he kind of winked at me. I said, "Did you think the Jesuits would do something like that?" And he said he wasn't a Jesuit. He said, "Those Jesuits, they're into everything." And I said, "Why would they do something like that?" And he just looked at me and said, "The people, they can't handle the truth. If they knew everything that's in the Vatican, there would be chaos." I said, "Well, what's everything? Tell me." And he would not, "I can't tell you, my son. I can tell you this, though. There are secrets in there that will," he would say something like, "your mind would be so expanded and you would learn so much." As well, why can't I? I'm a son of the Catholic. He said, "Yes, but it's not for the eyes of everyone. It's only the special priests that can handle this information. We want to protect everyone." I said, "Okay." So anyway, such is the life in Rome. So I never did really prove the Jesuits did that, but it's something that they would do, and they have done in many different other areas, and I'm sure it was them who planted it. Okay, creating all that chaos and confusion with the book called The Messianic Legacy. Okay, now I got another email from Randy Engel. Now, Randy Engel's a girl, I found out. I always, I thought I thought it was a guy, but it's a girl. And she's written a book called Marrano, Marrano. Okay. Now, she sent me this, and she, I guess, watches my show because I get emails from her all the time. And she said, for over 60 years, Catholics have been floundering in despondency and untruths. The ill-fated Vatican II gave strength and momentum to modernism. that destructive force described by Pope St. Pius X, in words which can't be repeated often enough as the synthesis of all heresies. A succession of popes have seemed unwilling or incapable of stemming the tide of novelties masquerading as the new church, promoting by cunning apostates in clerical garb the Novus Ordo Mass, which should be the center of our faith, has been a disaster. Catholics have unwittingly embraced the science fiction nonsense of Teilhard de Chardin's theistic evolution. Now we know that Chardin, and Hillary Clinton has also said that that's one of her mentors, and Bill Clinton, and so that gives you the connection, very strong connection to the Vatican through Teilhard de Chardin, who was basically the father of the New Age movement, a Jesuit. Now, the synchronistic scandals of the Assisi gatherings have been accepted by the majority of Catholics, while contradiction in terms which, stripped of puffery, means the surrender of the one true Church of Christ to false religions, challenging the faith to its core, has gone hardly noticed Catholics who don't want to be involved. Now, she says, just when we thought things could not get worse, we are confronted by an incumbent of the papal throne who was the ecclesiastical equivalent of a Mad Hatter. As Pope Francis sets out to drag us into a topsy-turvy wonderland of his made-up theology, he is buttressed by a popular appeal reflected in the agnostic media, always a bad sign. His so-called witticisms and smiling countenance have taken on a deathly aspect. We appear to be faced with the wholesale destruction of the faith of our fathers at papal hands. But the good Lord, apart from his comforting assurance that the gates of hell will not prevail against his church, has, throughout the crisis, provided faithful priests to bring us the Mass and unadulterated sacraments. So, I gather she still believes that there's a good side of the Catholic faith, which I totally disagree with. And so and I've gotten in not arguments, but discussions. I have a friend from Italy who feels the same way. He calls him, it's an old Catholic. And they believe that the church is the one true church and it's been infiltrated and destroyed. So they still cling to Catholicism. And I say the whole thing is satanic. And that gets me into trouble with these people. But anyway, that's what I think. And very important, outside of those faithful priests and unadulterated sacraments, and very important, sent us talented laymen and women who, with their writing skills, have literally kept the word alive. Truly, Catholic magazine and newspaper editors and individual journalists, always struggling against the odds, have written and are writing great articles for those who have eyes to see. Now, this, I believe, I'm going to say this right now, it wasn't her that wrote that, but John Bishop, who was the book reviewer for Randy Engel. So Randy didn't write this, so I have to say that Randy, I don't know if she's an old Catholic or believes that there's goodness in the Catholic Church, so I'll take that back because I misplaced this, and it was John Bishop who wrote that about the book she wrote, Murano, that he's going to get to. A little confusing when they sent me this email. So he apparently is one of those people that believes there's still a good side to the Vatican, or was a good side to the Vatican, and is a good side. Now, of course, there's good priests. I mean, there's priests that are good people that don't understand this, but I think once they understand it's satanic, they ought to get the hell out of there. One of the foremost of these, he said this, journalists always struggling against the odds have written and are writing great articles for those who have eyes to see. One of the foremost of these is the famed American Randy Engel, making a move into the world of fiction. She now brings us Murano, a novel of faith. You can get this too. Go to Kindle, I guess, and also Amazon, I imagine. Novel of faith, mystery, murder, and mayhem, at the Vatican. Now that's true. And what a rip-roaring roller coaster ride she has us produced. Fast-paced theological thriller, set a little time into the future. It is centered on a long-planned conspiracy to infiltrate the church with agents, phone priests, who by a rapid rise in the hierarchy will place one of their kind on the throne of St. Peter. So I guess the book takes on that aspect that there is a good side to the Vatican. I would say that there are some good priests that don't understand things, but that at the higher level, this is a satanic organization from the beginning, I believe. And there is no take over the good church by the bad Illuminati like they did even in Angels and Demons, right? That Dan Brown book that was made into a movie. And remember, what was the other one? The Da Vinci Code. Okay. So, she says it's a fast-paced theological thriller set a little time into the future. It is centered on a long-planned conspiracy to infiltrate the church with agents, phony priests, who, by a rapid rise in the hierarchy, will place one of their kind on the throne of St. Peter and bring about the destruction of the church. Sound familiar? The plot has been simmering for 100 years, and when the novel opens and the sudden and suspicious death of the reigning pontiff makes way for the enemy within, the enemy is a group of Latter-day Moranos comprised of the order of San Benedito. The original real-life Moranos were baptized Jews living in medieval Spain. Some of them converted to Catholicism out of conviction, but many others did so to escape forced exile, or for reasons of economic and social advantage. By 1492, the joint monarchs Isabella and Ferdinand had managed to end the 700-year occupation of Spain by the Muslims at the decisive Battle of Granada. Cleansed of Islamic occupation and with Catholicism restored, the question of the Moranos came to the forefront. The Inquisition was established to purge the country of heresy, with a particular focus on those Jewish converts to Catholicism who secretly adhered to Judaism. These false converts, the Moranos, were seen as deadly fifth column, subverting Christ's church. Some were condemned to death for their apostasy. Many more were expelled. Randy Engel's story rests on the determination of the modern-day descendants of the Moranos to seek revenge for their ancestors by destroying the Holy Catholic Church. Oh, please do. Please do destroy it. I mean, we ought to get, this thing is, I understand people's thinking, even in fiction here, but this church is not a church. It's a satanic coven masquerading as a church, and there is no Holy Roman Church, and St. Peter wasn't who they say he wasn't, the first pope, and the whole thing is a sham from the beginning, and I think that's the kind of book that should be written not as fiction, but as reality. So anyway, Holy Catholic Church through infiltration as described above. Our hero, Monsignor Antoni Morello. This reminds me of a modern day, another kind of take on Angels and Demons, right? If you're talking about infiltration. I'm not sure. I didn't read the book, so I don't want to make blanket statements yet. Our hero, Monsignor Antoni Morello, age 35, is an ex-U.S. Marine who saw active service in Afghanistan, is a strikingly handsome priest with an Adonis physique to match his classic Sicilian features. Born and bred in the Bronx, Morello is surrounded by his loving friends and family. His old parish priest, Father O'Malley, who nurtured Morello's faith from his childhood, is a particular guide and mentor. The book opens with a young Monsignor home in the Bronx on sabbatical from the Vatican, where he's a senior archivist, in close touch with various cardinals and other officials. In those hallowed halls, Antony is a traditional Catholic dedicated to the Tridentine Mass, surrounded by a plethora of modernists, but with a few allies among the hierarchy. Father O'Malley, the rector of St. Sylvester's, welcomes his young protege, his return not only as a loving friend, but as an ally to the priests. And it goes on. And it's that. I think that's enough on the story. To whom, let's see how it ends. Between, it's a long he did a review on it. Apart from a jolly good read, he says at the end, she has written a novel which provides a boost to the faith and the faithful in this time of darkness and despair. In another era, the book would, I believe, have received a church, whatever it is. But then, who am I to judge, he says. Okay, so I may disagree with her premise, but it's a fiction book, and I wanted to show you what's still out. You know, there's a lot of different things out there. People that think there's a good side of the church. There's people that still think the Holy Roman Catholic Church was the one true church. And then, of course, you get the other side of the story that we've given on this show a lot. And I look at it from a perspective that unless you understand what's really going on with other people, how are you going to figure out how to talk to these people, how to talk to people and talk to them about facts that show otherwise. And it's similar to, and I want to discuss this a little bit because I have a renewed interest in the flat earth and a little saying I call keep flat. Keep it flat. And, you know, I'm firmly convinced that whatever NASA is telling us and all their pseudoscience is really been nothing but a propaganda campaign. And it starts before you're even able to think on your own. You're presented with this, you know, as a child, before you're able to think on your own, you're told that the earth is the way they tell us it is, this globe model. And I'm firmly convinced it's much different. And I believe that when you start looking at things, the eclipse was a perfect example, and I can't explain, but on a globe theory, it just doesn't work. And the explanations given on how the sun, the moon, when they tell us rotates from east to west, can go west to east, and that shadow they do, it was very clumsily explained. And in fact, when it was asked to the Washington Post, she couldn't answer it, so she went to NASA, and one of their NASA guys answered it, but it was terrible, and they're supposed to, and some people said that's not sufficient, and NASA wrote back, we need about a month to figure out and give you an answer. So here they are spending, do you realize the budget at NASA was 19 point some billion in a year? That's about 52 million a year to do computer graphic images and to do spacewalks in underground submarine, in basically in scuba conditions, and they fake, most everything. It's all fake. And it's incredible when you start looking at it. But when you start understanding the real key, it's very interesting when the sun is the key. They worship the sun. So they created the sun to be 400 times bigger than the earth and 93 million miles away. It's not. It can't be. And it's easily proven that it's not. It's local. And it's easily shown if you really do the research. And just do it on the sun and the movement. And one of the interesting, there's a video out by a guy I like. His name's Daryl, and he does some really good stuff. And he said, they tell us that with the rotation of the earth and then the sun, that half the earth is in sunlight, half the globe, and half the globe is in darkness. So he phoned somebody in Australia, which is on what should be dark, then somebody in England, and then in Tacoma, Washington, where he is. And at the same time, the sun was shining, coming up. Everybody could see it. And they were on the other side of the globe where it's supposed to be black. What I'm saying is there's so much out there. Once you start looking at this, you will be amazed. And nobody can tell me otherwise because I like to use my own senses. Just basically certain things that just tell you what they tell us cannot be true. And I believe it goes deeper than just whether the earth is round or flat, and I don't believe it's as they tell us. I believe it's a flat surface, an enclosed surface, so that the waters are enclosed by the great ice wall or barrier that surrounds us all. So basically, the Arctic is the center and everything from there is south. That's why everything magnetic north, everything always goes to the north, to the Arctic. And it's not at the top, and the Arctic is not on the bottom, Antarctica. Antarctica is a vast area all around us, and we don't know. That's the real question. We do not know what is there. But we know there is something, and if you do the research, you'll find. And even the old New Standard map, the Flat Earth map that's even depicted on the United Nations logo, tells you a lot. There's even a old Buddhist map that shows that barrier, but then has little land masses beyond it. And some of their thinking was that there are certain waters that melt, and you can traverse them to get to another land mass. Now we know Admiral Byrd in 1954 went over that barrier and said there was a landmass bigger than the size of the United States that we have not even discovered. And he said that would be, and they were on TV on CBS, and they said that would be the greatest for young explorers to find right here on Earth. And guess what happened? Next year, 60 countries, they signed a treaty that no one is to claim that land, and no one is to go there. Citizens of all of our countries cannot even go there. It's illegal and it's guarded. They're hiding something. They're hiding land, maybe. They're hiding reality from us. There's a whole reality I don't think we understand. We don't even know what the Earth is down deep, what it is. If you see that they give you the picture of the core, and all that's pseudoscience. It's fiction. It's like a comic book, because we've only drilled down 7.5 miles. We don't know what's going on below. So that is the real interesting question. And if you're going to buy what NASA says, then I'm telling you, you need to do a lot more research in this. So I'm saying at the end here, keep flat. Keep it flat, folks. And I'll see you tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.